Hello, I'm Toby Mossop and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Chartwell. I'm delighted to be joined today by the highly distinguished physiologist, sleep expert and acclaimed author, Dr Nerina Ramlakhan. Nerina is an expert in the science of well-being and has spent 25 years helping people and organisations to thrive. She blends physiology, psychology, philosophy and her own personal experience to create profound shifts in awareness. She has spent a decade conducting sleep and wellness programmes at Nightingale Hospital, coached on burnout prevention at Ashridge Business School, and is the original founder of Bupa's corporate wellbeing solutions. Nerina has written 4 books, and her most recent book, Finding Inner Safety, published in 2022, outlines how to overcome burnout. She works with a plethora of clients and also speaks professionally around the world, and so today we're very fortunate that Nerina has come to talk to us at Chartwell. Nerina, it's great to have you here. Can you start us off by just telling us a bit about how you first got into this line of work?
Right, I suppose the starting point professionally was when I ended up in a little health screening clinic in the Square Mile in London, and I was measuring the health of city professionals. Now, up until that point, I was an academic, but I always knew that I wasn't that person who wanted to be in a white lab coat with test tubes and things like that. I wanted to work with real human beings. So here I was in a health screening laboratory, measuring the health of people from investment banks, law firms, all sorts of professional services firms. And this was, without giving my age away, decades ago, when the internet, email, mobile phones had landed on the scene, and the world, the pace of life, everything was speeding up. And it was impacting on the health of my clients. And I could measure this impact in the laboratory. So the blood pressure readings, the breathing traces, the ECGs, spirometry measures, even the blood fat levels, that was telling me that human beings were running in survival mode. So I got really interested in this because this was not what I had anticipated from my academic research. So why are human beings who are young, well paid, supposedly they should be fit and healthy, why is their physiology behaving like this? I got interested in this question. So this is where it led me to look at the impact of the external world on the internal physiology. Long story short, I started almost as if by magic being given opportunities to go into organisations and say to whole organisations, this is what's happening and this is what you need to do. Because what I noticed was that if I could help people to understand what was happening with their health, I could help them to understand that they could make better choices. They would feel better.
How much do you think is it the responsibility of an organisation, a company culture, for example, versus the individual responsibility to make sure that everything is balanced, that we're not straying into this area of burnout?
I suppose we have layers of responsibility. There are layers of responsibility. And the outermost layer being the government, the leaders, to establish, to set guidelines, clear guidelines, to establish the legislation that says organisations, employers, leaders, this is how people should be treated.
I mean, you hear of the French government talking about sort of, rules where you can't be emailed or contacted by your boss after working hours,
and boundaries. So you have this outermost layer of responsibility, then that filters into the organisation. You have the leaders of organisations. Because time and again, I don't just work with large groups, I also work with individuals one-to-one who will come to me and say, well, I can't do these things that you're telling me. I can't stop responding to emails in the middle of the night or when I'm on holiday or at the weekend because my boss does that as well. It's the expectation and that's what everybody else does. And so I think individuals feel disabled if the culture disables as well. But then at the core of it all, and this is where it comes down to this very important value which lies at the core of a lot of my work, of all of my work actually, which is the Mahatma Gandhi saying we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So then we come to the innermost circle in terms of layers of responsibility, and that's the individual. We have to be courageous and listen to our bodies and say, right now, I need to step away from this. I need to communicate with my line manager.
And I know, Nerina, in your most recent book, Finding Inner Safety, you talk about psychological safety, don't you?
Yes.
And that's something that I know is of increasing importance. There are a lot of interest in speakers talking about psychological safety because it's kind of the key driver of how effectively a company can operate. Do you think that is one of the most important aspects of a company culture in the modern day?
I would even go so far as to say it is the most important aspect. Psychological safety, feeling safe, feeling physiologically safe, feeling emotionally safe, feeling physically safe, of course. And then it's sometimes for some people, they don't entirely understand what that means. But it's almost as simple as, how do you feel when you come to work? How does it feel when you go on those away days? How do those emails feel when you receive an email from your manager? You know, and actually it might sound a little bit mystical or woo-woo or esoteric, but actually we all have those, we have that sixth sense. We know how we feel. And we also have people that we don't want to hang out with, and sometimes we're not so sure. And often it will come down to psychological safety, which is, how does it feel? What is the environment like? And does what is being said, does it match the way people behave? Because where there's misalignment, that then misaligns our physiology.
From your experience, what challenges do organisations face when it comes to building resilient, healthy and thriving workforces?
A challenging question. Yes. Well, there are many challenges, but, you know, I'm a great advocate of keeping things simple and practical. It's a big part of my work. Let's make this really, really practical. And I think for many organisations and leaders, there's such a demand to keep up with the speed and the demands of stakeholders. And this is happening globally. And again, a lot of this is to do with the pace of working and technology, the advent of technology. You know, I see a lot of very well-meaning managers and leaders and CEOs who want their employees, who want their people to be healthy, but they also have to keep up with this speed and this demand. And this is where they can fall through a crack, and you get people falling off the edge, you know, getting sick, burning out, including leaders. They don't build recovery into their days. And that's because often leaders or organisations don't tell their staff to do that, come to work and rest. So 20 odd years ago, I had this vision of going into organisations and saying, come to work and rest. But back then, no employers were ready for someone like me to say, come to work and rest. So I didn't. I wasn't allowed to. But now, more and more organisations, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the aftermath of that, are realising that people have got so burnt out that we need to look for creative ways of helping people to stop and recover energy, clever ways before they get back on the treadmill again. And a really simple way of doing this, while also meeting that challenge of keeping pace with everything, is just to tell people to come to work and work with their physiological rhythms and cycles.
You mentioned the pandemic, Nerina, and obviously now working from home is a huge part of most people's lives.
Yes.
Almost regardless of, you know, if it's a city-based job, people can work from home. Do you think that's had an impact on people's well-being in a good way, or?
There's been good and bad. So the boundaries have become very, very blurred. And in some respects, and I'm still working with this now, people have become tired because they've become a bit stale. And they're still working from home. And I'm not saying we need to stop working from home. And the hybrid model, we're having to find our balance with it.
Yeah.
It's taking a while for us all to work out what new normal means for each of us as individuals and as organisations and as teams and for the business, for the world at large.
So do you think mindset is a key ingredient to?
Mindset and body set. Because if we want to be now more agile, it takes not just mind, it takes body. And developing new ways of doing things and behaving and thinking and more creativity takes not just mind, but body. We need to start energizing the body, the bottom level of the pyramid. Physical resilience is going to feed the emotional resilience, which is going to feed the mental resilience. All of that feeds the spiritual resilience. Does that make sense, Toby?
Yeah, completely makes sense. Nerina, what's the plan now and what current projects are you involved in?
And so I'm working on book number 5, and I haven't got a title, not even a working title for it yet. So I'm not going to say what it's going to be called, but it's uplifting. Again, it's different from the sleep books and even the finding inner safety, which very much went into trauma, talking about trauma. But it's, of course, it's following a thread, but it's going to be very uplifting and very exciting and energizing. Okay.
Fantastic. We look
Yeah.
forward to it.
Yes, and I'm speaking on some stages, talking to lots of very receptive corporate clients. A lot of work with young people, because there are a lot of people who are dispirited and feeling hopeless and tired. A lot of young people who are feeling a bit like they've got mental health problems, and some of them do, and a lot of them don't. But it's this tiredness and malaise and almost contagious hopelessness that they've got caught up in. And they're caught up in a kind of spiral and a cycle of it. And they want help with how do they break out of it, because they've got great ideas, but they're just looking for a springboard.
Sounds like very fulfilling stuff, Nerina. I think what I like is that you seem to practice what you preach. Nerina, thank you so much for speaking to us today. It's been truly enlightening. As part of each interview, we do ask speakers one final question, which is, if you were to be stuck in a lift with somebody, who would it be and why?
If I wanted to be really cheeky, I'd love to have Mahatma Gandhi in that lift with me. And I would say, late Mahatma Gandhi, you talked about being the change. What did you really mean? I mean, how were you being the change?
Yeah.
What did you mean? Because I know that he had a very tricky relationship with his wife and his children. And they felt very, he wasn't always the popular guy at home, but he was a great philosopher and a great leader, and he inspired the world. How do we show up and be the change in every aspect of our lives? So I guess that would be
great.
Where I would go in that lift with that person.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people would agree with you. It'd be fascinating to spend some time with Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
Back from the dead. Brilliant. Thank you, Nerina.